All right, Shabbosai, good morning, a good tevach. Hopefully everyone had a beautiful and uplifting, rejuvenative Shabbos, and a great schos Baruch Hashem to begin another week of learning together. To begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning share, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan, Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month. In the schus of a refuah shlema for Kathy's sister, Dana Baker Matson, we hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, she will have a complete and enduring refuah. We thank our Day of Learning sponsors, Philip and Judy Sanfield from California, in loving memory of Phyllis Fingret Broad Vega Bas Shmuel on the occasion of our first yard site. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors today, Man and Diane Marks, in memory of Patricia Zivi, beloved mother of Diane Marks. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamos will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. But with that, let us begin. We have a great daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Chavav 26, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem at the Mishnah on daf Chavav. Hakosef Tovse Gittin. Mishnah says this also. Let's remember again, we've already established that in a get, and we're going to see by the way, it's not just in a get, it's actually really in every document. So there are two parts. There's what's called the tofes and the toref. The tofes is the boilerplate part of the document, the part that is the same in every single document. The toref is the part of the document which contains specific and unique information. So in the case of a get, it'll be the information of the man's name, the woman's name, the place of the city, the place where the get is taking place, the date, the zman, and again, in a loan document, it'll be the name of the borrower, name of the lender, amount of the money, so on and so forth. So therefore, the Mishnah says as follows: Hakosef Tovse Gittin. If a person now, we'll say, if a sofer wants to write Tovse Gittin, so let's say you have a sofer, and what does he want to do? He wants to have Gittin on hand. So what he decides to do is he wants to write the boilerplate part of the document, right? The pro forma part of the document. So what's the halacha? He has to go ahead and leave blank the name of the man, the name of the woman, and the place for the date. Good. So we'll say Rashi. Rashi says Kosef Tovse Gittin. Shesoferhu v'notel schar. We're talking about over here a sofer who obviously gets paid for his work. And he wants to go ahead and have a document ready to go. In other words, also if someone comes into a shop and they want to get, he wants to have it ready to go. V'notel schar. So we'll say this is purely a business issue. Right? It's a business issue. A sofer doesn't want it to be that someone's going to come into the store, right? Need a get, and the sofer meanwhile is going to be busy with other shtaras, and he's going to be unable to go ahead and service this particular customer. So what he just wants to do is he wants to have Gittin on hand. So the Mishnah says, not a problem, you could do that with part of the document, as long as you leave out the couple-specific information from the document itself. Next, Shtari Milva, loan documents. So it's Shianiach Makom HaMilva, Makom HaLove, Umakom HaMos, Umakom HaZman. So we'll say similarly with loan documents. Same idea. You can go ahead and write up the pro forma part of the loan document, once again, provided that you leave out the transaction-specific parts. So name of the borrower, name of the lender. Rabbi said makom just means like the space where it be written. So you leave out the name of the lender, name of the borrower, makom amos, the amount of money, and makom azman, and the date. Good. So the Gemara goes weiter. So first of all, I'm sorry. Let me go back just for 1 second. Look at Rashi. Go back to Rashi. So remember again, by Gittin. So Rashi said over here something very interesting. Rashi says, remember, the Mishnah says, you want to go ahead and write up the boiler part of the shtaros, that's fine, but you have to leave out the name of the man, name of the interesting Rashi. Rashi says, Shimroa tagar beinehem lo yomar hareini kosef kolaget. So say this is pretty wild. So can you imagine the sofer? See, right, he goes for Shabbos lunch to Reuven and Rachel. He's invited over, right? And he sees this marriage is a mess. He's like, you know what? Let me get a head start on this get, right? In other words, I see this is coming. Right? I don't want to. No need for me to wait for them to come to me, right? Let me get started on this. So that's why the Gemara said, also, even though again the sofer might know that this is coming down the pike, halacha l'maisa, he can only write the tofes. Now we've seen this is the din by Gittin. This is also the din by general shtaros. So the example the Mishnah gave was now shtari halva. Ultimately, again, in loan documents. So same idea with loan documents. Halacha l'maisa can write the boilerplate. Anything specific needs to be left blank. Next, shtari mekach. They will say sale documents. Sale documents. Zar she'aniach makom halokeach, u'makom hamocher, makom hamaos, makom hasadeh, u'makom hazman. Ultimately, going to say, so again, you have a sale document, no problem. You can write the boilerplate part of it, but you have to leave out the name of the purchaser, the name of the seller, the amount of money, the location of the field, and the date. The Gemara says, mipnei takana. All of this was done mipnei takana, because of an enactment. The Gemara is going to explain what that statement means. First of all, what is it going on, and what's the takana? Next, I will say, Rabbi Yehuda posel bekulan. So I will say, this is fascinating. Rabbi Yehuda says, halacha l'maisa, you can't do any of this. Posel bekulan means he does not agree with this ability to pre-write shtaros. And it sounds like what he's saying is, you cannot pre-write any part of the shtar. Posel bekulan. Rabbi Lazar, machshe bekulan. Rabbi Lazar says, ultimately, again, all of this is good. Now, I will say, what Rabbi Lazar over here is, Rabbi Lazar is agreeing with the first part of the Mishnah. Rabbi Lazar agrees. You could go ahead and pre-write what we'll call the tofes part of the shtar. The boiler part of shtaros, you have to leave out the transaction-specific parts of the document. Chutz migitei nashim. The exception, of course, is for Gittin. I will say, now take a look. Rashi says over here, Chutz migitei nashim, tigazrinon bahen, tofes atu toref. So we'll see this in just a little bit. Shneimar v'kasav la lishma. So we'll say, so Rabbi Lazar says like this. Rabbi Lazar says, in theory, I happen to agree with the Tanakam of the Mishnah. I agree with the halacha as espoused, namely that for any shtar, you are allowed to pre-write the boilerplate part of the shtar. You have to leave out the transaction-specific part of the document. However, Rabbi Lazar says, but I'm going to say you can't do it by Gittin. But you just said you could. So we'll say what we're going to see in the Gemara, what Rashi already alluded to, is Rabbi Lazar is concerned that if we allow you to pre-write the tofes, you're going to end up what? Potentially coming to write the Torah. Now, both say pre-writing the Torah is going to be a big problem. Why is it going to be a big problem? That's the Mishnah ends off, the kas of law, lishma. Because as we've already established, a get must be written lishma. So I will say, writing a get, pre-writing the Torah part of the get, even though you have in mind for a specific couple, and even though maybe you're right, and you're actually going to come to and get divorced, Lamaisi can't do that. So Rabbi Lazar agrees in principle that halacha lamaisi you can go ahead and pre-write the boilerplate parts of the shtar, but halacha lamaisi by Gittin he's going to tell you don't do it lest you come to write the couple's specific information, and ultimately again then you have a problem with lishma. So I will say, so this is our Mishnah. The point. So I will say essentially what we look at the Mishnah is there's really like three parts to the Mishnah. Part number one is the Mishnah espousing a concept. The concept is you can pre-write non-transaction specific parts of the document. What the halacha calls tofes. Tofes can't pre-write Torah. What does that apply to according to the Mishnah? What does that apply to? All documents. All documents. That's part one. Part two, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you cannot do any of this. Posel, you can't do any of this. Now, why? We'll see in the Gemara. Part three, Rabbi Lazar, you can do all this. Rabbi Lazar agrees with the statement of the Mishnah, but says, but by Gittin, don't do it, lest you come to write the Torah as well. Beautiful. Now let's see the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Shmuel, both say, what's also interesting about this? Obviously, what's driving this whole? Let's see the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. So tzarch she'aniach af makom hariat muteres lechol adam. So both say, so if you remember again, Salocha l'maisa, in the get, so the most important line in the get is hariat mutaras l'chol adam. Remember, I'm going to say it's the exact opposite, the exact wording, the exact opposite of the wording that you use to get married is the exact opposite of the wording you use to get divorced. When a man gets married, he says to his wife, hariat mikudeshes li kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. And I both say, what does mikudeshes mean? What does mikudeshes mean? So again, I will say mikudeshes means exclusivity. Like when something is hekdish, it is the exclusive property of the Beis HaMikdash. When a man says hariat mikudeshes li, the hallmark of marriage is exclusivity. Therefore, again, for Gittin, what is the phrase ultimately that activates Jewish divorce? Hari'at muteres l'chol adam. You're permitted to everyone. You're permitted to everyone. Now, I will say, interestingly enough, that's how we're going to see. We're going to see that although you could attach certain conditions to a get, any condition that somehow binds the woman to her husband, by definition, prevents a divorce from being chal. We'll talk about that more in any event. So the Gemara says over here, Rabbi Shmuel says over here, even though the Mishnah just stated the name of the man, the name of the woman, the name of the place, the name, the date, you also can't pre-write this line. Fascinating, right? Even though both sides, I just want to point out, it's the same line in every single get. So one might have thought that this is part of the tofes, not part of the toref, but because this is the actual line which activates divorce, it cannot be pre-written. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Rashi says over here, af makom hari'at mutares shegam zeh ikaro shel get. Because we'll say this phrase is the ikar of the get. Rabbi Lazar. So Rabbi Lazar here, and this reflects to Rabbi Lazar, Da'amar ede mesira karsi. So Rabbi will say all of this, and this really reflects the idea of Rabbi Lazar. Let's remember again. Let's take a step back. We keep always referencing back the same machlokes, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Meir. What's that machlokes? Eidei Mesira Karsi or Eidei Chasima Karsi. Remember, this needs to be emblazoned onto your brain because this machlokes comes up every single sugya. Rabbi Lazar says, what creates the effectiveness of the get? The witnesses who witness the giving over of the get. Now, both say, if you hold Eidei Mesira Karsi, what's the corollary to that? The corollary to that is Ksiva Lishma. The writing itself, writing of the get, has to be done Lishma. So if Rabbi say, the Gemara is just pointing out, Rabbi Shmuel is just pointing out, this whole Mishnah, which clearly requires Ksiva Lishma, right? Because Rabbi says it's happening over here. If you don't need Ksiva Lishma, you could pre-write everything. Right? Rabbi say, because remember again, Rabbi Meir, who holds Eidei Chasima Karsi, that is the signatures on the shtar that create the effectiveness of the get. Rabbi say, what has to be written Lishma? What has to be written Lishma? Only the signatures. A get does not have to be written Lishma. In Rabbi Meir's world, I'll say, if you want to be like the best sofer in town and pre-write every single get with every single name variation known to Klal Yisrael. All right, you're not going to get the, perhaps like the newfound, Israeli names, right? Okay, so those you're not going to be able to anticipate, right? So, whatever. Those you can't get. But Lamaisa, if you just want to go ahead and put every variation ultimately, again, of biblical names, go for it, right? You can definitely do it. According to Rabbi Meir, will say, you can do that. Because Rabbi Meir, you do not need ksiva lishma. All you need is chasima lishma. So Rabbi say, so now, Gemara says over here, so let's just trace the progression. So the Mishnah tells me, you can pre-write toves, you can't pre-write toref. Good. Shmuel comes along and says, by the way, you also can't go ahead and pre-write the phrase Hari'at mutares l'chol adam. You are permitted for every man because that is the ikar of the get. Now the Gemara says, by the way, whose opinion is being reflected here? Whose opinion? Whose opinion? Rabbi Lazar. Why? Rabbi Lazar holds Eidei Mesira Karsi, the witnesses who witness the giving over of the get, solidify the kashrus of the get. He requires what? Ksiva l'shma. And that's this whole thing. Beautiful. To which the Gemara says, Utzricha. Now, if you notice, by the way, there's been a trend. This is now the third Mishnah in a row where we've established, like Rabbi Lazar. Now, understand, these Mishnayos really flow one from the other. So now the Gemara is going to say, Utzricha. Now, why do we have to say by every single Mishnah that it reflects the view of Rabbi Lazar? It's clear. Rabbi will say, remember, anytime you see in a Mishnah that you require ksiva lishma, that the get has to be written, the get itself is written in the Shema, that's always reflective of the position of Rabbi Lazar. Because Rabbi Meir doesn't require it. So why do you have to keep saying it every single time? I'll tell you why. We'll say ultimately again, if it would have said only the earlier one, the first Mishnah, which is talking about writing on Mechubar, that's the case ultimately again, where it affects the view of Rabbi Lazar, Diktani in Kosvin. As Mishnah says, you can't write, but Mechubar Lekarka, or you can't write the get on something that is attached to the ground. Vikatani Kasvu. And it says, but if you did it. So therefore, again, I will say, that's clearly reflective of the view of Rabbi Lazar. Aval Seifa diktoni shen kiyom aget ela b'chol samav. But the Seifa that said that the authenticity of a get is only through its signatures, Ema Rabbi Meir hi damra edi chasima karsi. I would have said that reflects the view of Rabbi Meir, who holds edi chasima karsi. And if we had just said that Mishnah Bahi Nami Ikalok Mak Rabbi Lazar, you could set up that Mishnah like Rabbi Lazar. Aval ha, but this Mishnah, Ema mid the Sefer Rabbi Lazar, Habi Reisha Lav Rabbi Lazar. I would have thought that since the Sefer is Rabbi Lazar, the Sefer is not Rabbi Lazar, therefore it's Tzvicha. So I will say bottom line, even though it sounds a bit repetitive, that we're going out of our way to show that each Mishnah is reflective of the view of Rabbi Lazar. The Gemara demonstrates that you need to explicitly state it by each of the Mishnayos, which I will say also is a fascinating lesson in life, and I think also a good yesod, perhaps a good yesod in parenting. I will say, every parent knows that their children knows certain things, but as a parent, sometimes I have an obligation to go ahead and say something, even if my kid knows it. Certain basic yesodos that I want my children to know in life. I know they know them. Now, part of the reason I know they know them is because I've said it a million times, right? The other reason I know that they know it is because hopefully I model it. And I will say some things, even if you know they know it, you still have to ultimately say it. Again, every family is different and every parent is different, but like the yesodos in life that you want your children to know. Don't just assume because you've said it in the past and because you model it that they know it. Keep saying it. Keep reinforcing it over and over. You know what I'll say? Those are the things that when you say it, your kids roll their eyes about because you've said it a million times. I will say, but all of us know our parents said to us those things and we rolled our eyes when they said it. And now for many of us, they become the very tenets and very pillars upon which we have built our adult lives. It's the greatest tova we do for our children, to say explicitly and to reinforce the most important yisodos we need them to inculcate within the identities they build. Those already, you see this from the Gemara. The Gemara says sometimes you just gotta say stuff, even if you know that everyone knows it. Incredible. So remember again, the Mishnah said that this ability to pre-write the tofes, the boilerplate part of the shtaros, is permitted because of the takana. What's the takana? My takana, Rabbi Yochanan, mipnei takana sofer. Ultimately, it will say because this is a takana for the sofer. It's a benefit for the sofer. Now we'll say now, okay, what's the takana sofer? Was there Rabbi Lazar Yida Amar Eidei Misira Karsi? Ultimately, we'll say now obviously all of this works because it's reflective of the view. Ultimately, again, of Rabbi Lazar, who holds that Eidei Misira Karsi, right? Therefore, the ksiva has to be the Shema. So take a quick look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Mipnei Takana Sofer. It's about 8 lines up from the bottom, 10 lines from the bottom. Mipnei Takana Sofer, Hitiru Lichtov Tofes Shelo Lishma. See, here's what's interesting. Remember, we're going now in the sheet of Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar holds Eidei Misira Karsi. If you hold Eidei Misira Karsi, then what's the halacha? What has to be Lishma? The ksiva. Now we'll say, in a perfect world, which ksiva is Lishma? The whole thing. Right? We'll say, if you were asking how to go ahead and structure the ideal get, right? Okay, sounds like a strange thing to say, right? But right, if you're looking to structure the ideal get, in other words, you get a clean piece of parchment, and the sofer would write it from beginning to end for this particular couple. What the Mishnah is introducing us to is there's something called Takanas Sofer. So Takanas Sofer, Abosai, means that Sofrim get busy, and we want them, also remember again, we want them to be able to write this get when called upon, so we allow them to pre-write the Tofes part of the get. Obedinu, Tafilu Tofes Nami Lo Lichtov. Abosai, in reality, as we just said before, we would much prefer for the entire get to be Lishma. Right, we'd like even the tofes. However, when we shum takana sofrim, shara rabbanon. But ultimately, I would say the takana. It's interesting. So when you read the Mishnah, I would have thought actually the takana is really for the woman, because as we've seen a number of times already, when it comes to a get, what's our goal? Get it done fast. Right? That's our goal, because We don't want the husband changing his mind. And now again, it could, what the Gemara says, no, the Takana is actually for the Sofrim, which it all comes together. In other words, we want the Sofer to be able to do this as quickly as possible because it's a benefit for the Sofer, it's also a benefit for the Isha, for the woman. But Lamaisa, in an ideal world, we'd have the entire get written Lishma, even the Tofes, but we make a Takana to benefit the Sofrim, that we allow them to pre-write certain documents, or I should say, certain boilerplate part of the documents. So we'll say incredible. So now, Rabbi Huda Polsa B'Kulan, and I will say now, Rabbi Yehuda, remember, so now we're going through the Mishnah. Now that I know what the takana is, right? The takana ultimately is, takana sasofrim, a benefit to the sofrim to allow them to pre-write. Rabbi Yehuda, remember again in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said, you can't do any of this. You can't pre-write anything. And if you pre-write anything, the document is pasul. Why? Rabbi Yehuda pasul b'kulan, gazar, tofes atu toref, gazar shtaros atu gittin. Wow. So we'll say Rabbi Yehuda has quite a restrictive position. Rabbi Yehuda says, you cannot pre-write anything. What are we concerned about? We're concerned that if we allow you to pre-write the Tofes, what's going to happen? You're going to end up writing the Torah. Now, both sides, the truth is, by Gittin, that's a problem. By Shtaros, is it a problem? Not really. Not really. They both say, I want to point out something interesting. Technically speaking, even if you pre-write an entire loan document, right? Let's say I'm about to lend Ruvain. I'm about to lend Ruvain $10,000. I tell the Sofer in 2 weeks I'm going to write Ruvain a document. Technically speaking, even if it's pre-written, it's not possible. The only thing you can't put in there is a date. Right? Date's going to be a problem. So you can't pre-date. But I will say, but Allah Rabbi Yehuda says like this. What we're concerned about is, if we allow you to do this with other shtaros, you'll come to go ahead and do it by Gittin. So if Rabbi Yehuda has a double chashash. Number one, we're not going to let you pre-write the Tofes, lest you come to write the Toref. And we're not going to let you do it by other shtaros, lest you come to do it by Gittin. So a very restrictive position. So essentially Rabbi Yehuda says, no pre-writing of anything. No pre-writing of anything. Rabbi Lazar, on the other hand, holds, Rabbi Lazar, machshe bekulan chutz mi gittin hashim, tofes atu toref gazer, shtaras atu gittin lo gazer. Now, and this is very interesting. Rabbi Lazar apparently holds that halacha mice in general by gittin, not a problem. General by shtaras, no problem. Pre-write the boilerplate part of the shtar. Rabbi Lazar is machmir as by gittin. Rabbi Lazar does not allow you to pre-write gittin, even the tofes. Why? What are we concerned about? We're concerned that if we let you pre-write the Tofes, you're going to come to what? Write the Torah. So now essentially we have a three-way machlok. It's very, very exciting. Tanakama holds, you can pre-write the Tofes of anything. Pre-write the Tofes of anything. Rabbi Yehuda says, you cannot pre-write the Tofes of anything. And Rabbi Lazar says, you can pre-write the Tofes of everything other than Gittin, but we're not going to let you pre-write the Tofes of Gittin. What are we concerned about? That if we let you pre-write the Tofes, you're going to come to pre-write the Torah. And that is of significant concern. It was also interesting to kind of contemplate, that this whole thing of Takanas HaSofer is to allow the Sofer to get a head start on something. I often find, I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but in life, there's often like this tension between getting a head start on things, right, versus maximizing your presence, right? You always want to be like ahead. I always want to be ahead. And being ahead often goes ahead and says, let me get a head start on this, a head start on this, a head start on this. But sometimes in life, I don't know if anyone ever feels this way, you could feel so overwhelmed, like getting a head start on everything, that the present moment, the quality of the present, becomes so fundamentally compromised. And I will say, there's a certain beauty in the position of Rabbi Yehuda. What's the beauty in the right? It's almost like a mindset. What's Rabbi Yehuda's mindset? Take it as it comes. Take it as it comes. Don't get a head start. Right? Focus on what is in front of you right now. Don't pre-write. Don't this. Don't that. When it comes your way, ultimately, again, you'll figure it out. See, everyone else, the Tanakama and Rabbi Lazar, are all focused to a certain degree, to varying degrees. How can you get a head start on the things that may come down the pipe? And Rabbi Yehuda is like, Just take it as it comes. Just take it as it comes. It's just interesting. Just interesting in life. There's always so many things going on, and you never want to be behind. So you get a head start on this, a head start on this, a head start on this. And then, let's say you ever have it where you're old. Is this like a therapy session? I feel like, okay. I just want to say, you ever have like a moment where you feel so overwhelmed trying to get a head start on everything. So suddenly, I'm overwhelmed, but not because of anything that's happening now, but because of stuff that's going to happen, but I want to get a head start on. Sometimes it's good to be a Rabbi Yehuda of Chassid, or Chassid Rabbi Yehuda. You know what? Whatever comes my way, I'll figure it out. But I'm not going to try to get in front of it right now. I'm just going to try to focus on my present, maximize the present, live the best life now, confident. Whatever comes my way, I'll figure it out. We'll see what the halacha l'mai says just a little bit. And then most of the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, "Shenei amar v'kasav la, I v'ha ki kasav la atorifu dichsev nabos." And remember again, at the end of the Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar says, while I agree that by all of the shtaros, you could pre-write the tofes, by Gittin you can't. Why not? Because the pasuk says v'kasav la l'shma. But says, 1 second. V'kasav la l'shma is a din in the Torah. It's not a din in the tofes. So why can't you pre-write the tofes? Ela ema mishum shene'emar v'kasav la l'shma. Rather, we'll say, no. What it means is like this. Rabbi Elazar is concerned, as we just mentioned before, Rabbi Elazar is concerned that if we let you pre-write the tofes, you're going to come to what? Pre-write the Torah. And that is a problem because a pre-written Torah ultimately, again, is in violation of Lishma. Remember, the Torah, which contains the couple's specific information, must be written at the actual time of divorce and only by the explicit command of the husband. I says the Gemara, Kasha, Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi say, here's the problem. Look what you just did. We just said that the Reisha of the Mishnah, which allows you to pre-write a Tofes, but not pre-write a Torah, is reflective of the view of Rabbi Elazar, right? Who holds a de Mesira Karsi. So therefore, the Ksiva should be Lishma. Ideally, even the Tofes is Lishma. But Mipnei Takana, because of benefit for the Sofrim, we allow you to pre-write the Tofes, but not the Torah. But then at the end of the Mishnah, we quote Rabbi Elazar. Again, we'll say Sim Rabbi Elazar. Quote Rabbi Elazar, who says that you can't pre-write the Tofes of the get. So which one is it? To which the Gemara says, you're right. Trei Tanai leave it to Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi said, there's machlokes. There's machlokes in what Rabbi Elazar said. Did Rabbi Elazar allow, again I will say, to be clear, obviously the position of Rabbi Elazar that Eidin Mesira Karsi, and therefore Ksiva has to be Lishma, that's undisputed. The question is, did Rabbi Elazar allow for the pre-writing of the Tofes? That apparently was a machlokes. It's a machlokes in Rabbi Elazar. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Reb Shabsi Amar Chizkiya Mishum Kitata. So we'll say, it's very interesting. So we'll say, so remember again, here, let's take a step back. The Mishnah said that the reason you're allowed to pre-write a tofes. Now, remember again, if you're a purist, are you pre-writing a tofes? If you're writing a tofes? No. Why not? Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar holds. One more time. Eidem Mesira Karsi. If you hold Eidem Mesira Karsi, right? Ultimately, Ksivas Yishua. We'll say, right, we're going to get to a point where you're just going to be, people are going to find you in a corner, rocking back and forth, saying, Rabbi Elazar says, that's my goal, right? That's our goal, right? I'll say, and people are going to say, what's wrong? You're going to say, nothing, I just learned Daf Yomi, right? That's it. That is our goal. We'll say, so ultimately, yeah, so just to point out, and therefore, according to me, right, therefore, really make a din, you wouldn't pre-write anything. But Allah Lamaisa, Mipnei Takana, we allow you to pre-write the Tofes. So now the Gemara said, what does it mean Mipnei Takana? So far we said Takana for the Sofrim. For the scribes to be able to go ahead and have at least a pro forma document on file. So once it comes on Reb Shabsi, he says in the Chizkiya, Mishum Kitata. So no, the Takana Bosai is because of fighting. They're both saying, now what does this mean? Kitata means discord. Look at Rashi. 26b, 3 lines down. Look at Rashi. Mishum Katata, second line in. Mipnei Takana diktani la ve'ater de tofes kai ela tzar she'aniach kai mipnei takanas kitata. They're both saying, now listen to this. This is fascinating. So they're both saying, Chizkiya says no, like this. The reason you cannot write in the couple's specific information is to avoid marital discord. Why? For Rabbi Meir, Rabbi And I will say, and in fact, the Mishnah is the view of Rabbi Meir. And I will say, remember again, what does Rabbi Meir hold? What does Rabbi Meir hold? The Amar Eidei Chasima Karsi. Now, what Rabbi Meir holds that it's the witnesses who sign on the shtar who create the effectiveness, and it's the right. So, what's according to Rabbi Meir? Which part of the document has to be the Shema? Which part of the document? Signatures of the witnesses, which means I will say something amazing. According to Rabbi Meir, what can you do? What could a sofer do? What could a sofer do? Pre-write the entire get. Watch this. So, in other words, Ubedinhu, Dafilu Toref Nami Lichtov. So we'll say, so what happens? So in reality, you should be able to pre-write an entire get, even the Toref. Now, Bosi, now listen to this. The Zimnin, the Shamaleh, the Sofer, to Gok Siv. Now, Bosi, now listen to this. What are we concerned about? What are we concerned about? That if a Sofer could go ahead and write a get, pre-write an entire get. Now, Bosi, what are we concerned about? Can you imagine the following scene? Right? Rachel goes to the Sofer to buy a mezuzah, right? And what happens? She hears him writing a get that Reuben is divorcing his wife for Rachel, right? We're divorcing his wife Rachel, right? So Rachel, the wife of Reuben, goes in to buy a mezuzah. She hears a sofer is writing a get that Reuben's divorcing Rachel. So Rabbi say, what's going to happen when she comes home? Oh, you know what's going to happen when she comes home. So therefore, again, there is a strong concern about a sense of marital discord that can be created unnecessarily if Gittin are pre-written. So in order to avoid that, so the Gemara said, the Shamla of the Sofer, the Kaksiv, she hears the Sofer writing a get for Reuben and Rachel, the Savra Ihu Ka'amarle, and she thinks it's her husband who commissioned this get, V'havele Katata Bahadei. And we'll say this is going to cause incredible marital discord. So therefore, we'll say the Gemara suggests over here something amazing. So therefore, we'll say a totally different reading of the Mishnah. Maybe the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir holds Eidei Chasima Karsi. If you hold Eidei Chasima Karsi, you could pre-write the entire get, everything. Names, dates you can't put in there because you can't predate, but names, locations, Hari'at Mutaris L'chol Adam, pre-write everything. But the Mishnah says you can't. Why? Nivnei takana. What's the takana? We don't want quarreling couples. We don't want a woman to hear some get that matches the name of her and her husband, and she's going to think that her husband has this plan, and we'll say it's going to be a disaster. To avoid that, ultimately, again, we say this over. You could pre-write the Tofes, but you can't pre-write the Torah. So now listen to this. A third interpretation, outside, which is we allow them to pre-write the get, ultimately, again, because of Takanas Agunos. Now this goes back to what we kind of thought about before, which is, I will say, it's in the woman's best interest to have what? To have documents available. To have a get, someone of a get. Amri Rabbi Meir, Amri Rabbi Lazar. So we'll say, some say this reflects the view of Rabbi Lazar, some say it reflects the view of Rabbi Meir. So we'll say, now listen to this. Amri Rabbi Meir, Damar Eidei Chasima Karsi. So some say it reflects the view of Rabbi Meir, who holds Eidei Chasima Karsi. They will say, meaning what? And therefore, Eidei Chasima Karsi. Obedinhu, Dafilu Toref Nami Lichtov. In reality, according to Rabbi Meir, you should be able to pre-write a get in its entirety. The Zimnin, the Havele Katata Bahada. The most now watch this. So technically speaking, a get could be, right according to Rabbi Meir, a get could be written in its entirety beforehand. They both say, what are we concerned about? Couple's going to have a fight. The Rasa Chale, and ultimately again he's going to get angry at her. Vizarik lenehila, and he's going to throw a get at her. Uma'agin, right? Umosiba, and ultimately we'll say ma'agin in this context doesn't mean make her an aguna. Ma'agin in this context means make her a divorcee. We'll say, watch this. Rabbi Meir will say like this: why don't we allow pre-writing of a get? We'll say, why do we allow pre-writing of a get? We'll say, here's the problem with the pre-written get. A pre-written get is too readily available. And what are we concerned about? We'll say this is such a good musra because I would venture to say all of us have done this. In the heat of a moment of marital discord, right? We'll say, you say stuff that you're like, I can't believe I said that. Or I can't believe I did that. So we'll say, what are we concerned about? If a get is readily, right? If you can get an off-the-shelf get, right? You can get an off-the-shelf get, I will say, we are concerned that in a heated moment of marital conflict, what are you going to do? You're just going to give your wife a get. And I will say, Ma'agin law. Ma'agin law doesn't mean you're going to make her an aguna. Ma'agin law now means that she's a single woman. You've just divorced your wife unnecessarily in the heat of the moment. Amr, the Gemara says, Umosava. Amr Rabbi Lazar, Umosa, Amri Rabbi Lazar, he, Tamar Edim Sira Karsi. So we'll say, others say no reflexive Rabbi Lazar, who holds Edim Sira Karsi. So in reality, Rabbi Lazar, remember again, it has to be written Lishma. Or Bedinhu, Afilu Topis Nami Lo Lichtov. But in reality, ultimately, again, you really even shouldn't be able to write the Tofes. The Zimnin, the Baila Mezl Medina Sayam. But both say sometimes the husband is going to go overseas and he wants to take care of the get before he travels. The lo ashkach safra, they're not going to be able to find a sofer. V'shavik la v'azul uma'aginu mosivla. And the boss say, what's going to happen? Again, this will say is the more classical interpretation of it, which is a concern that he's going to be ready to go ahead and divorce his wife, but now he's going to be traveling, gone for an extended period of time, and if there is no form of get readily available, ultimately, again, she could become an aguna. So therefore, Rabbi say, it turns out that we have 4 different interpretations of what the takana is. Possibility number 1 is the takana ultimately is a benefit to the sofrim, that the sofrim have a get readily available, and it reflects the view of Rabbi Lazar holds Eidei Mesira Karsi. And in reality, again, we'd rather not have any part of the get pre-written. We'd rather write everything at the time, but for the benefit of the sofrim, we allow them to pre-write the boilerplate part of it, the tofes. That's interpretation 1. Interpretation 2, the takana Rabbi say is actually reflective of the view of Rabbi Meir. And mipnei takana means according to Rabbi Meir, the entire get could be pre-written. But halacha l'maisa, we tell the sofer to leave out the couple's specific information so as to avoid any sense of marital conflict. The last 2 interpretations Rabbi say is mipnei takana. Ultimately, again, is mipnei takanas agunos. Rabbi say that means something different for different people. According to Rabbi Meir, technically speaking, you could have an entire get pre-written, but we don't have that in order that a man doesn't summarily divorce his wife. And according to Rabbi Lazar, we're concerned that if he does want to give the get to his wife, if the get has to be written from scratch, he's not going to want to wait around, and he's going to leave her an actual aguna. So we'll say these are the different interpretations, ultimately, again, of the takana. Umakom azman. So I will say again, furthermore, you have to go ahead and leave out. I'll just mention, but I'll just read you the Rambam. The Rambam does say as follows. This is Rambam Hilchos Gerushin, Perek Gimel, Halacha Zayin. Halacha Zayin. Listen to the lashon over here. He says, Mipnei takanas sofer, hetiru chachamim l'sofer sheyichtov tov segin, v'yaniach makom ha'ish, u'makom ha'isha, u'makom ha'zman, u'makom ha'areat mutares l'chol adam. Kedei sheyichtavei l'shem ha'isha magarish, u'l'shem ha'isha miskareshes, v'achar kach yachtmu ha'edim l'shmo v'l'shma. So I will say this is actually interesting. So the Rambam adopts the position that ultimately, again, this is takana sofer. You're right. First of all, I'll say this is how we pass halacha l'maisa, that you could actually, the sofer could pre-write the boilerplate part of the shtar, so you could go ahead and pre-write the pro forma part of the shtar, and then but again, leave blank the name of the husband, name of the wife, ultimately again the location, the date, and the phrase hariat mutares l'chol adam. Those have to be left out and can only be filled in ultimately again when the husband commissions the writing of the get. Now I will say, I'll just point out to you, we're not going to do this now, but the Rambam's lashon is very interesting. The Rambam says you have to be able to write these parts l'shma, and then afterwards the witnesses have to sign l'shma. So I will say a little bit of a window into the position of the Rambam, that we're going to see the Rambam essentially is going to hold like both Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Meir. You really need both ksiva of the get l'shma and ksiva l'shma. So we'll say, well, again, we'll talk about this. Now, whether or not that also means you also need Eidei Mesira is a different discussion. Okay, but we'll get to that. In any event, we'll say, let's go back to Makom Azman. So you also have to leave the place of the date blank as well. Kapasik v'tani. Now, here's what's interesting. Now, remember, kapasik v'tani, lo shtam mina nisuv, lo shtam mina erisin. Now, we'll say, if you notice, by the way, the Mishnah is not making a distinction between whether you're getting divorced from erisin or from nisuin. Let's talk about this just a moment. We'll say once a couple enters into erisin. Let's remember again. So we do everything. We do everything together under the chuppah. But lamaisa, it is important to understand that in reality, historically, marriage was divided up. Right. First, a man would go ahead and give the woman an item of value. I mean, you could effect kiddushin in 3 ways. But this man is giving her an item of value. He says, "Hari'at mikudesh asli mikol adam." Right? Sorry, "Hari'at mikudesh asli gidas Moshe b'Yisrael." So when he's mikadeshar, they're married. They can't live together, but they're married. So I will say, now what that means is, if they decide they don't want to go forward with nisuin, they still require a get. Right? You need a get from erusin, from kiddushin as well. And I will say, now what the Gemara just pointing out over here is, you want to notice something interesting, which is that our Mishnah, when it's discussing Gittin, makes no distinction whether or not the get is being given from erusin or from nisuin. Right? Either way, the Mishnah says if you're giving a get, the sofer could pre-write the boilerplate parts of the shtar, but cannot pre-write the date as well as other items. Now, both say the Gemara says that's very interesting. So listen to this. So the Gemara says bishlama min hanisuin. So we'll say I understand why you can't go ahead and pre-write the date when you're talking about a get from nisuin. Why? Bein lemandar mishum basachos ika. But remember again, we had last week, why do you have to date a get? Right? Why do you have to put a date in it? So remember, we'll say there are two reasons. We had a machlokes. One opinion said, Shemichapa basachoso. What are we concerned about? A man is married to his niece, right? The niece committed adultery. Because it's not just his wife, but it's also his relative, he has rachmanas on her, so he has a great idea. What is he going to do? He's going to give her a get without a date. Get without a date. That day, I will say, when witnesses come and claim that she committed adultery, what is she going to do? She's going to pull out her get. She's going to claim she was divorced, and no one could contest that because there's no date in the get itself. The other possibility, I will say, is why do we put a date in the get? So that the husband should not illegally take the peiros of his wife's property. Since he's only entitled to peiros during their actual marriage, we're concerned that if there's no date in the get, even after they're divorced, he's going to continue selling her peiros, and halacha l'maisa, that's illegal. So to put an end to that, ultimately we put a date in the get. So the Gemara says, so if we're talking about a divorce from nisuin, both of these reasons apply. However, elamina erusin, but I will say, if we're talking about a divorce from erusin, bishtam lamandar mishum basachoso ika, elamandar mishum peri arusa me'isle peri. That wasn't interestingly enough. If we're talking about a divorce from erusin, remember again, I will say, the concern about shemichapa basachoso, covering for your wife who's also your niece, that applies. Because also remember again, there is an isra adultery even during erusin as well. But if it's about peiros, I will say ultimately again, a husband doesn't get peiros during erusin. We haven't discussed this, but we'll see this. The right to a wife's property, to use wife's property, only comes after nisuin. So Rabbi says, here's what's interesting. So essentially what the Gemara is asking is like this. In the case of a couple who's getting divorced from erusin, if you hold the reason for zman is that the husband doesn't misappropriate peiros, that reason doesn't apply during erusin, and in fact, you should be able to predate. When I say predate, put in that date now. In other words, if the sofer knows that the couple is coming to them today, there's no reason why that morning he can't put the date in the document. Amrav Amram Hanmosa Shamis Minedula. The Amar Mishum Takanas Vlad. So Rav Amram said, I heard in the name of Ula that the reason you can't do this is because of Takanas Vlad, a benefit for the child. Okay, so the Gemara says, what does that mean? V'lo yedana ma'nihu. But I never really had any idea what this was talking about. But Kevan, then I heard the following. What did I hear? Ha'omer kisvu get larusasi lichisha echna sena egar shena. So listen to this interesting case. A man says to the sofer, do me a favor. Right now I'm betrothed, right? I have erusin. I'm going to do nisuin and then I'm going to divorce this woman. So do me a favor, that ultimately go ahead and write for me a get that will be chal after I go ahead and I get married. So Rabbi will say, what's the halacha? So eno get. Ultimately, again, it's not a good get, right? You can't do such a get like this. Now, what's the reason? What's the reason? I will say, why not? Shema yomru gita kodem libna. Now I will say, here's what's interesting. I will say. So ultimately, again, what the husband will call him Reuven is asking from the sofer is like this. Right now, Reuven has erusin with Rachel. He tells the sofer, I'm going to marry her, and then I'm going to divorce her. So write a get for me now that I could utilize after we get married. To which the Gemara says, you can't do that. Why? Rabbi say, Gzeira Shemayomru Gita Kodem Libna. Rabbi say, there's a concern. Here's the problem. let's say they have Nisuin, and then Rachel becomes pregnant, and then Reuven uses that get. So I will say, what's going to end up happening? When you look at the dates, what is it going to look like? What is it going to look like? That Rachel was divorced before she became pregnant. Which I will say, now, again, what's the status of a child born out of wedlock? What's the status? Kasha. Nothing wrong. But I will say, but it is what's called pigam mishpacha. Pigam mishpacha doesn't look nice. Right? I will say it's a blemish. It's a blemish on the family. So I will say, so again, just one more time to go over this case. So right, Reuven has had Erisin with Rachel. Reuven tells the Sofer, I'm going to do Nisuin, but I'm telling you, after Nisuin, I'm divorcing her. So just write a get for me now. We're not going to have time to insure because we're returning all of our gets, right? So just write. So just go ahead, just write for me. Go ahead and write for me a get now. And I want to use that to, someone says you can't use it. Now, it's interesting. Why can't you use it? You can't use it because of the date issue. Because if she becomes pregnant, it's going to look like the get was given before she became pregnant. Hachanami, so Rabosai over here, Gzeira, Shemiyom Rugita Kol Rabosai. That's the problem over here, giving a get during Erisin as well. That's the problem as well. I will say that if it turns out that she's pregnant, which I will say we'll talk about pregnant during Erisin. Yeah, sometimes it happens. I will say so Lamaisa. We'll talk about that in a separate sugya. We'll say so. Right? Hopefully, it'll be a daf that falls out in the Shabbos, right? So, right? I'll say so Lamaisa. So Lamaisa. So the Gemara says like this. So the Gemara says that what we're concerned about is if we allow you to go ahead and pre-write, and if we allow the sofer. So I'll say. So here's what's interesting. See, even though based on the reasons we gave for a date. Right, for date and a get. Either Shemi Yechaba Basachoso or Peros. Technically, again, those sound like this. Right? Shemi Yechaba applies, Peros doesn't apply. There is a general concern of Gita Kodim Limna. We're concerned in general about dating a get prior to actual divorce, and of the concern that she may be pregnant, and ultimately, again, it may look like the get was given before she became pregnant. Amar Bezira, Amar Rav Mashila, Amar Rav Nuna, Saba, Amar Rav Adabar Ava, Amar Rav. Halacha, Kereb Elazar. Ultimately, we'll say the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar. The halacha is like Rabbi Elazar. Rashi says, "Sheposa b'tov say gittin gzirim shel Torah." Okay, so I kind of gave it away a little bit. Right here, the Gemara says the halacha was Rabbi Elazar. We'll say which Rabbi Elazar? Rabbi Elazar at the end of the Mishnah, who says you cannot pre-write the tofes of a get. We're concerned that if you pre-write the tofes, you'll come to what? Write the Torah as well. So Kari Rav Aleid Rabbi Elazar Tabina Dechachimi. Rav said about Rabbi Elazar, ultimately again, that he was the best, the smartest of all the Chachamim, the best of the Chachamim. Va'afilu b'shar shtaros, and Rabbi say, is this the halacha by shar shtaros as well, that you can't pre-write? Shar shtaros, Amar Apabi b'shvei d'Rava, Hai asharta d'daini. I will say, ultimately again, I will say, actually, if you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says, afilu b'shar shtaros, b'may depalok Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yehuda, va'amar, va'achshar b'tov se shtaros, Amrav Nami Alach Rabbi Elazar B'Tmiyah. So we'll say, now remember again. So the Gemara wanted to say this: the Alach of Rabbi Elazar, namely by Gittin, you can't pre-write the topics. But remember, Rabbi Elazar held by other shtaros you can pre-write the topes. So does the halacha follow Rabbi Elazar by other shtaros as well? V'amar Apabi Moshe D'Rava Haya Sharta D'Daini D'Michtavei Mikamei D'Lasadu Sadi Achasimas Yadayu Psula. So let's remember again, Asharta D'Daini Rabbi say is on a document, I will say, let's say you have a loan document, and the authenticity of the document was challenged. So they would have a process called Kiyum Shtaros. What's Kiyum Shtaros? You certify the signatures of the witnesses on the document. So Allah will say, after Beis Din does that, what they do is, they write like a note on the document itself. That's called an Asharta D'Daini, that they certified the signatures. I will say, let's say Beis Din knows they're going to end up certifying the signature, and they pre-write this certification document. It's possible. Why? Alma mechsi keshikra. See, I will say why? Because even though they're going to actually come to certify it, pre-writing a certification looks false. Right? It looks false. Hachanami mechse keshikra. So I will say, but ultimately, again, so too over here, pre-writing a document, right? They'll say, let's say, for example, pre-writing a loan document or pre-writing a sale document also is mechsei keshikra, looks false. They'll say, why does it look false? The transaction didn't occur. But this is not true. Mid Rav Nachman. Based on Rav Nachman, we'll say, what did Rav Nachman say? Dam Rav Nachman. Omer Hayi Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir used to say as follows. Afilu matzah ba'ashma. Now remember, we'll say one more time, Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, what does Rabbi Meir hold? What does Rabbi Meir hold? Eidei Chasima Karsi. He told Eidei Chasima Karsi, which part of the get has to be written? The Shema? Signatures of the witnesses. Therefore, technically, you could pre-write everything. Watch this. But you're walking along, right? Reuven's walking along the road. But so, ba'ashba, he finds a get with his name and his wife's name, the city's name. Everything is perfect. Chasmu v'naslala. He has witnesses sign on it, and then he gives it to her. Kasher. Ultimately, I'll say it's kasher. Now, what do you see from here? And even the Rabbanan ultimately, again, they only argue on Rabbi Meir in the case of a get isha, because by get isha you need l'shma. But however, by shar shtaris lo. But by shar shtaris lo, you see that halacha l'maisa, there is no problem pre-writing them. Dan Rabbi Asi Am Rabbi Yochanan shtar shalava bo uparo eino chozer v'lo berbo shekvar nimchal shibudo. Now we'll say this is fascinating. We'll say it's incredible. We'll say let's say Reuben lends Shimon $10,000. Okay, we'll say so. Now what happens? Baruch Hashem, Shimon pays back the debt. Now we'll say Shimon wants to borrow another $10,000 from Reuben. So we'll say, he says, great, you still have that document? Let's just reuse that document. Now we'll say, now leaving aside the date issue that may exist, the Gemara says you cannot go ahead and reuse that document. Why? Because we'll say a document creates a shiba, creates a lien. Once the loan has been repaid, the lien is lifted. Once the lien is lifted, the same document cannot be used to recreate a new lien. It was just an interesting idea. By Shtaris. I will say, what do you see from here? Taima dinim chashibudo. I will say, the only problem with reusing the loan document is what? That you can't recreate a new lien from a document that had an old and forgiven lien. Aval, mishum shikra lo chashinan. But I will say, what do you see from here? We're not concerned that reusing a pre-written document has the appearance of a falsehood. So therefore, I will say, you see from here that the concept of mechsek shikra, that something looks like a falsehood, is not a problem. So I will say, so bottom line, how do we paskin? So I will say, I already told you, I spilled the beans a little bit too early. Right, I already showed you how we paskin by Gittin. By Gittin, I will say, we paskin that Allah Chalamaysa mishum takanas sofer. Ultimately, again, you can go ahead and write what? Write what? The tofes of the get. You cannot write the Torah. Why not? Because the Torah has to be written the Shema. In addition to the Torah, which is the date, name of husband, name of wife, location. What else can't you pre-write? Hari'at mutaras l'chol adam. Right? That's part of the Torah as well. That's how we pass him. The Rambam then says that once the husband then initiates the actual divorce process, you can write the Torah Lishma, Eidim Sang. I will say, what about by other shtaros? Interesting, the way we pass by other shtaros is you can pre-write other shtaros. You can actually pre-write other shtaros. The one thing you can't put in other shtaros is what? A date. Because I will say, remember again, at least in loan documents and sale documents, ultimately again, date creates a lien. Predating the date creates an artificial lien, but you could pre-write the document and it doesn't have the appearance of mechsek shikra bosai. Shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom. Have a great day, everyone. Good to see everyone.